In this video we're going to replace the original radio in this car with a new DAB stereo. There are benefits to replacing the factory radio with a new radio rather than using a DAB adapter. A new stereo is generally neater with no trailing wires. You can also get hands-free calling, a USB port and Bluetooth streaming depending on the model that you choose. Before getting started, it's worth mentioning that all cars are different when it comes to the original radio and the wiring. To replace the original radio, you may need a fascia and a wiring harness. Fortunately, these are readily available to buy online. If you prefer, you can contact a car audio installer who will be able to handle everything for you. So these are the tools and materials that we're going to use today to install this single DIN Sony DAB radio in the dashboard of the Corsa. We've got first of all the radio and the fascia that it's going to go in. This will create the right size for the radio to slot into the dashboard. We've got the removal keys so we can take the old radio out of the dashboard. We've got an adapter for the aerial as well, so we can still use the FM AM aerial with the new radio. And we've got a wiring harness as well, so that we can convert from the car's wiring to the wiring in the socket that the radio needs. General purpose screwdriver set with various bits in there that we might need. A crimping tool as well for any wiring that we have to look at. We've got a tin here with a few different bits and pieces. We've got a fuse tap which we might need to use, some bullet connectors and some automotive wiring as well. All cars are different when it comes to this wiring, but we'll cover that in a little bit. First, the old stereo needs to be removed. Make sure the power is off and use the removal keys to slide out the old radio. The keys insert in the holes or the slots. Pull the keys outwards to the left and right sides, then pull everything back towards you. The radio should just slide out. Unplug the aerial connector and the connector block. Now that the radio is out, we need to remove this metal cage which holds the factory radio in the dashboard. We need to do that so we can insert the plastic fascia for the new radio. In the back there's a T20 screw which I've taken out now, and I've just bent the bottom and the top of the cage out a little bit so that it will pull out. When taking this out, be careful with the wiring, that will have to slide through the back. It's all sharp edges, so just be careful that you don't strip any insulation off the cables or cut your hand whilst you're doing this. Just pop that out of the way. Now the fascia can be installed. This is pushed in until the tabs click into place. Be careful with the fascia as the tabs can be delicate. As an aside, the fit of this particular fascia isn't great. Some manufacturers offer a genuine fascia, and this could be better than an aftermarket one. Now that this fascia is in place, we're almost ready to insert the cage for the new radio that'll keep it securely held there. Before doing that, because this has some sharp edges and it's a bit difficult to reach through, I'm going to concentrate on the wiring. Here we've got the original connector from the old radio, so we need to use our wiring harness with that to convert to wiring in the sockets that the new radio needs. We've got the AM/FM aerial connector here as well. We have an adapter for that to use as well. And we have the connector for the DAB aerial. We're using a magnetic aerial which we installed in a previous video. So all I've done is pulled through the wire so it's ready to go here in the fascia. Something we also need to consider in this car is how to get a switched live feed for the radio. This isn't provided in the wiring here, so the harness has a loose wire on it, the red one, which we'll need to connect up to a suitable source. Some people will find one within the car. The cigarette lighter is a popular source because on a lot of cars that comes on and off when you turn the key in the ignition. The new car stereo requires a permanent live feed and a switched live feed. The permanent feed is used to keep the radio's presets and settings. If your car battery ever goes flat, you might notice that you have to set up the radio again. The switched feed turns the radio on and off with the ignition. This means that you won't forget to switch the radio off when you get out of the car. The manual for your radio will have a diagram with more details. At the start of the video I mentioned that the wiring is different depending on the car. Unlike this car, you may already have a suitable switched 12-volt feed for the radio. If you search online or speak to a retailer that sells the wiring harness, you should be able to find out what you need. At this point, you could ask a mechanic or auto electrician to make this connection for you. It's really important to take appropriate precautions when working with electrics and use the correct parts, wire and fuse. Rather than cut into the car's wiring to get this feed, I'm going to use a fuse tap. This plugs into an existing slot in the fuse box and will provide the switched feed for the radio. There are already some very good videos about installing a fuse tap, and they're linked to in the description below. As the fuse box and its location will be different on your car, I won't go into the entire process here. The objective is to bring a switched 12-volt feed from a suitable source to the wire marked switched live on the new wiring harness. With the wire pulled through, I can strip both ends ready for the connections. The same needs to be done on the new wiring harness. They can then be crimped together with a butt connector. Again, there are some very good videos on making these connections, and they're linked to in the description below. The fuse tap comes with a pre-installed butt connector to crimp onto the new wire. In the fuse box, the existing fuse for the cigarette lighter is removed and put into the fuse tap. You should only use a slot which is for something like a cigarette lighter or the rear windscreen wiper. Never use a slot which is used by critical systems like lights or safety features. I've inserted the original fuse in the bottom slot and the new fuse in the top slot. I've also checked which is the correct way around to install the fuse tap in the fuse box. The videos I've linked to explain why you should do this and how to check. Back in the interior, and it's time to use the adapter for the aerial connector. The loose blue power wire needs to be inserted in the correct hole on the large radio plug. I've checked in the manual for the radio and know which position it needs to go in. The Fascia connector connects to the original aerial plug. Then the quad lock connector can be pushed on. This has a clip which folds down to keep it securely connected. Now we have two standard connectors which can be used with the car stereo. Most DAB stereos now have their own adapter to convert from the two standard plugs to a smaller proprietary one. This is plugged in as well. A normal harness like the one we're using here won't keep the steering wheel controls. You can buy adapters if this is something you would like to keep with the new stereo. The cage which comes with the radio can now be installed in the fascia or the existing slot in the dashboard. Removal keys are supplied with the new radio to detach it so that it can be installed. The cables are passed through and the cage is slid into place. Tabs are situated on all four sides of the cage. These get pushed out so that the cage is secured to the dashboard. The easiest thing to do is insert a flat screwdriver into the tab and twist by 90 degrees. The tab will fold out. Do this all the way around the cage until it doesn't move. The DAB aerial, original aerial and Sony wiring harness are now plugged in. The radio can be slid into the cage, but don't push it all the way back yet. This is just in case something doesn't work and we need to remove it. Switch on the ignition and then the radio and wait for it to initialize. Depending on your radio, it might scan for stations or you might need to do that. Check that DAB, FM, AM and other functions are working. Save some presets too. Now switch off the radio and the ignition. When the ignition is switched back on, the radio should go back to the last station you were listening to and the presets should still be there. If this isn't the case, you might need to swap some wires over. The red and yellow wires on the Sony harness have bullet connectors so that you can do this. Changing the connection will swap the permanently live power, which is used to retain settings and presets, and the switch live power, which brings the radio on and off. The user manual will explain this in more detail if you need to do it. With everything working, the radio can be pushed back into the cage until it clicks. If the radio needs to be removed now, the new removal keys will have to be used. A piece of trim pushes into place around the radio, and now the installation is finished. If you have any questions, please do leave a comment. If you found this video useful, please give it a thumbs up and subscribe for more like this. We have other videos on digital radio in cars, including videos about aerials and DAB adapters.